Ethan Ward had lived alone on his ranch for nearly 10 years. After his wife had passed away, the quiet house felt emptier each day and the long, lonely nights stretched endlessly. His days were filled with work, feeding the animals, mending fences, checking the crops. But when the chores were done, he would sit by the fire and stare out at the wide, open plains. The wind blew across the valleys, carrying the scent of dry grass and distant mountains. It was beautiful, yet it reminded him how alone he was. One afternoon, as Ethan rode along a narrow dirt path through the hills, he noticed a small figure sitting beside an old, abandoned wagon. She was a young girl, no older than 16, with dark hair falling in soft waves around her face. Her eyes were deep and serious, as though she had seen more hardship than anyone her age should. She was dressed in simple clothing that had been patched many times, and she looked tired but alert. She held a small basket of herbs, carefully arranging them as if she were preparing them for something important. Ethan slowed his horse and called out softly, "Hello there. Are you all right?" The girl looked up quickly, startled, and for a moment she seemed ready to run. But then she studied him, noticing the calm in his face and the gentle way he spoke. She nodded quietly and didn't answer at first. "I'm Ethan," he said, dismounting and leaving the reins with his horse. "Where are you heading?" The girl hesitated, then said, "I don't have anywhere to go. I was just sitting here." Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, but there was a strength in it too. Ethan realized that this girl was alone, completely alone, and she had been surviving on her own. Her name, she finally said, was Naya. Ethan offered her a drink from his canteen, which she accepted with shaking hands. She drank slowly, her eyes never leaving him, as if she were studying him just as he had been studying her. When she finished, Ethan asked, "Do you have family nearby?" Naya shook her head. "No. I'm all alone now." Her voice cracked slightly, and for the first time she allowed herself to look a little vulnerable. She told Ethan about how her parents had died, leaving her to care for herself. She had learned to hunt small animals, forage for herbs, and trade her beadwork with travelers for food. Life had been hard, and she had grown up fast, but she had learned to survive. Ethan listened quietly. He didn't ask too many questions, knowing that sometimes people only share what they are ready to share. He simply offered her a choice. She could ride with him back to the ranch, where she could rest, eat, and have a safe place for the night. Naya hesitated. She had been told by others to trust no one, to stay cautious, and to rely only on herself. But something about Ethan seemed different. There was no harshness in his voice, no hidden intentions. He was kind, and he had an honest look in his eyes. Slowly she nodded and agreed to go with him. The ride back to the ranch was quiet at first. Naya held her basket tightly on her lap, her gaze wandering over the hills and the trees, taking in the vast, open land. Ethan noticed her curiosity and asked gently, "Have you ever been on a horse before?" She shook her head, and Ethan smiled. "Then you'll have to hold on tight. Don't worry, I'll take it slow." He guided the horse carefully along the path, making sure she felt safe. She laughed softly at first, a small sound that seemed almost foreign to her own ears. Then, as the wind picked up and the plains stretched endlessly around them, she laughed more freely. Ethan watched her, thinking that in all his years, he had never seen a smile so genuine and unguarded. When they arrived at the ranch, Ethan showed her the simple house and the barn where the animals were kept. He offered her food, warm bread and fresh milk, and a place to sleep for the night. Naya was grateful but nervous. She had never been indoors with anyone she didn't know well, and the thought of being cared for felt strange. But the exhaustion of her long journey and the comfort of the warm fire made her feel safe enough to stay. Over the next few days, Naya began helping around the ranch. She fed the animals, swept the floors, and even helped Ethan repair the fences that had been damaged by a recent storm. She worked quietly but efficiently, showing a determination and skill that impressed Ethan. He noticed how careful she was with every task, how she never rushed, and how she treated the animals with gentle hands. It reminded him of the wife he had lost, her patience, her care, and her ability to find joy in small things. Despite her strength, Naya was still cautious. She would often sit alone by the window, looking out at the plains, lost in thought. Ethan didn't press her to talk, knowing that trust could not be forced. He simply continued his own work, offering her small words of encouragement or sharing a warm meal when she returned from her chores. Slowly she began to relax, her eyes losing some of the wariness they had when they first met. One evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink over the hills, Naya approached Ethan. She looked nervous, her hands fidgeting slightly, and she spoke in a soft, almost trembling voice. "Ethan," she began, "if I please you tonight, will you keep me forever?" Ethan stopped and turned to her. Her words were not a simple request. They carried the weight of someone who had been abandoned before, someone who feared that no one could stay. Ethan could see the uncertainty in her eyes, the way she held herself as if ready to retreat at any moment. He walked over to the window and looked out at the darkening horizon. The plains stretched endlessly, and the wind carried the smell of rain. He thought of the years he had spent alone, the nights by the fire, and the emptiness that had filled his heart. Then he turned back to Naya and spoke calmly, without hesitation. "You don't have to earn a place here. You already have one." Naya blinked, her lips parting slightly in surprise. She had expected some condition, some test, some demand, but Ethan offered none of that. He simply offered her acceptance. For the first time in years, she felt relief wash over her, mingled with something new, a quiet happiness she had not known she could feel. That night, as the first raindrops began to fall on the roof, Naya slept in the small guest room Ethan had prepared for her. She didn't need to fear the night, didn't need to plan her next move, didn't need to worry about being alone. Outside, the wind carried the scent of wet earth, and the world felt calm for the first time in a long while. Ethan sat by the fire in the main room, thinking about the unexpected turn his life had taken. He had come to the valley seeking peace, expecting only the work of the land to occupy his days. Instead, he had found someone who reminded him of the value of trust, companionship, and quiet joy. In Naya's presence, the house no longer felt empty, and the long nights no longer felt lonely. Over the following days, their bond grew slowly but steadily. They shared stories by the fire, laughed over small mistakes while tending to the animals, and watched the stars stretch across the night sky. Naya began to feel a sense of home she had never known, and Ethan began to feel that the years he had spent alone had not been wasted. They had prepared him to be ready for someone like her. The plains were vast, and life could be harsh, but together they found a quiet strength. Trust grew in small gestures, a smile, a shared meal, a word of encouragement, and in the soft glow of the lanterns at night, a sense of belonging began to take root. And so, under the endless sky and the gentle rhythm of the rain, Ethan and Naya began the first chapter of their life together, not as master and guest, not as protector and ward, but as two people who had found in each other a place to rest, a place to trust, and a place to call home. The weeks turned into months, and the seasons began to shift over the wide plains. Ethan and Naya had settled into a quiet rhythm on the ranch. The mornings were filled with the sounds of the animals stirring, the soft nicker of horses, the low moo of cows, the clucking of chickens. Naya had grown accustomed to the early hours, rising before the sun to help feed the animals and prepare breakfast. She moved with ease now, confident in her work, and Ethan often found himself watching her quietly, appreciating her skill and care. Though life on the ranch could be hard, they had learned to enjoy the small joys of each day. Naya took special care in tending to the garden, planting rows of vegetables and herbs that flourished under her careful hands. Ethan worked alongside her, repairing fences, checking the water supply, and maintaining the house. They often paused to share a quiet meal together, speaking little but enjoying each other's presence. Their companionship had grown naturally, without rush or pressure, and it was clear that both found comfort in the steady rhythm of their days. The townspeople began to notice the change as well. Some were curious, others skeptical, but over time they started to respect Naya. They saw how she cared for the sick animals and how she helped visitors and travelers with her quiet kindness. Children would sometimes come by to watch her braid flowers into her hair, or to see her tend the herbs in the garden. It amazed them how she could work so diligently, yet always have a smile or a gentle word for anyone who passed by. One morning, a letter arrived at the ranch, carried by a government agent who had traveled many miles. The letter was official, instructing that any remaining Apache people were to be relocated to a distant reservation. Ethan read the letter carefully, his face growing serious, but he did not panic. He turned to Naya and said calmly, "This is not our fight to start, but we will face it together." Naya stood silently beside him, her hands clasped in front of her. She had faced danger before, but never had she imagined someone would try to take her from the home she had just begun to call her own. Her eyes were steady, though a flicker of worry crossed them. She trusted Ethan, and she trusted the bond they had built, but this was a challenge neither could ignore. When the agent arrived, he was polite but firm. He read aloud the orders, explaining that any Apache person still living in the area needed to report for relocation. Naya stood quietly behind Ethan, listening. She did not flinch, but her hands trembled slightly. Ethan spoke up, his voice calm but resolute. "I built this ranch with my own hands. Anyone who lives here is part of my family. She is welcome to stay because she is part of this home." The agent studied Ethan carefully. He could see that Ethan meant every word. After a long pause, he nodded respectfully and left, leaving the ranch in peace. Naya exhaled slowly, relief washing over her. She looked at Ethan, grateful not just for his words, but for his unwavering protection and trust. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying with me, for giving me this home." From that day on, their bond deepened even more. Naya continued to care for the animals and the land, but she also began building something new near the barn, a small round shelter made from branches and hides. It was her way of giving thanks to the land and to Ethan, a symbol of her gratitude and her newfound sense of belonging. When Ethan asked her why she was building it, she smiled softly and said, "A heart needs a place to return to, even if it has nowhere else to go." The little shelter became a quiet haven for them both. They would sit inside on rainy days, sipping tea and talking about simple things, the stars, the animals, the changing seasons. It was a peaceful place, away from the work and the demands of the ranch, where they could simply be together. The bond they shared was built on trust and respect, and it grew stronger with each passing day. Neighbors began to notice that Ethan's ranch was different now. There was a sense of warmth that hadn't been there before, a feeling that the house and the land were alive with laughter and care. Travelers passing by would comment on the cheerful voices they heard in the distance, the sound of two people working together in harmony. Some of them even stopped to help, drawn by the kindness they saw in both Ethan and Naya. One afternoon, as the sun was setting in brilliant colors over the plains, Naya and Ethan stood side by side, looking at the fields they had tended together. The crops were growing well, the animals were healthy, and the little garden near the barn was flourishing. Naya leaned slightly against Ethan's shoulder, feeling the warmth of his presence. "I never thought I could have a place like this," she said quietly. "A place where I belong," Ethan smiled, his hand resting gently on hers. "You belong here because you've made it your home. You've given this ranch life, laughter, and hope. You belong here because you are part of my life, Naya, and I want you to stay." They continued to work on the ranch side by side, each day deepening the trust and respect they shared. Naya taught Ethan small things about the land, how to recognize certain plants, how to find water during dry spells, how to care for animals in gentle ways. Ethan in turn taught Naya about tools, construction, and the ways of running a ranch efficiently. Their learning went both ways, each respecting the other's knowledge and experience. As the years passed, the ranch became a symbol of hope and care in the valley. People spoke of Ethan and Naya as examples of partnership and trust, how two people from different backgrounds could create something strong and beautiful together. Naya's little shelter remained by the barn, untouched by storms or wind, a quiet reminder that kindness, patience, and respect could build lasting homes and hearts. Even during the hardest seasons, when the wind blew cold across the plains and the crops were threatened by drought, Ethan and Naya faced the challenges together. They celebrated small victories, the first bloom of the garden in spring, the safe delivery of a calf, the laughter of a neighbor's child who came to visit. Every day was filled with moments that strengthened their bond and reminded them that life, when shared with someone you trust, could be joyful even in the face of difficulty. One evening, after a long day of work, they sat in the little shelter together, watching the stars appear in the clear night sky. Naya rested her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling safe and content. "I think this is what home feels like," she said softly. "Not just a house, not just land, but being with someone who cares for you." Ethan looked down at her, a gentle smile on his face. "Home isn't about walls or roofs. It's about trust, care, and moments like this. You've made this place home, Naya, just by being here." In the years that followed, the sound of two people laughing often carried across the valley at sunset. The ranch remained vibrant, a place of warmth and life, and the small shelter by the barn stood as a testament to the quiet strength and love that had grown between them. Travelers passing by often paused, noticing the happiness and peace in the lives of those who lived there. People remembered that love and companionship did not always begin with grand promises or dramatic gestures. Sometimes it began with small acts of kindness, with trust, patience, and the willingness to stay with someone through life's quiet challenges. For Ethan and Naya, the plains had become more than land. They had become a home, a sanctuary, and a place where hearts could rest. And so, under the wide open sky and the ever-changing seasons, Ethan and Naya's life on the ranch continued, filled with work, laughter, care, and quiet happiness. The plains stretched endlessly around them, yet within the walls of their home and the small shelter by the barn, they had found something permanent, something strong, and something worth protecting. The life they had built together, full of trust, love, and belonging.